was back in 2015, and my brother, he was sort of going through a pretty rough couple of days. We didn't really know why, but he was very sort of up and down in his behaviour. And I guess rather than sort of confronting him, because he was a very, he's can be quite a sensitive soul, we just kind of took the brush it under the carpet approach and went with sort of positive distractions. It was a Friday evening, and we'd both got home from work. We sat down, ate dinner, and he seemed okay. He seemed, it was probably one of the better days, if anything. And following on from dinner, he said, I'm going for a walk, which was part of his daily routine. So, the conversation was sort of left that that we were going to play a game when we got back. I said I'd pick the game. He was like, yeah, fine, see you soon. Anyway, 20 minutes later, half an hour later, I think it was, Mum gets a phone call, and I just hear a scream like nothing you've heard before, and basically it was my brother ringing home to say that he'd thrown himself off a bridge next to a railway track, and obviously that he needed help. So yeah, obviously ambulance was called. He was airlifted to the hospital, and I just remember my mum being left in a broken state, inconsolable, couldn't string a word out of her. I think shock was probably setting at the time, but so yeah, obviously regarding my brother and his recovery, I mean, amazingly he survived. Don't know how. He spent 12 weeks in hospital before he was released. I think he broke basically everything down his left-hand side, leg, arm, hip. Had to have, I think, 2 operations it was. But made a full physical recovery 18 months later. But I mean, it was a very difficult time, as you can imagine. We obviously, once it all had gone on, we didn't really know obviously what the outcome was going to be, whether he'd survive, whether he wouldn't. Once we got past that, it was, what's his physical recovery going to be like? And then obviously the most important one, I guess, was what was his mental state going to be like? Because we didn't know whether he was going to come out and do it again or whatever, or what. We didn't even know what the answer was to it, because mental health at that time wasn't really a publicised thing with men. It was, it was very taboo. There was shame to it, and I think there was an element of that in my brother trying to take his life. But for me, the biggest impact, the biggest part for me was the fact that I'd sat down and had dinner with him, and again used that positive distraction to kind of not confront his problems. So that for me kind of was it had a really big impact on me, because for a long time I almost felt accountable for his actions. And I can just remember sitting there night after night after night while he was laying there in hospital going, I could have prevented it. And I had sleepless nights. I was lost, because I'm the youngest of 3 brothers, but I still feel, especially with Matt, my middle brother, still feel like I have an obligation to protect him. Don't know why, it's just the way I've always felt towards him. And I felt like I failed him as a brother. And, whilst all this was going on, I was supporting my family, because I had my brother going through this. My mum and dad were obviously having to cope with it as well. And I think my mum was feeling similar things that I was. You know, she felt like she'd failed him as a parent, and you know, it was kind of coming to terms with what happened. But whilst all that was going on, I never sort of come to terms with my own guilt. So I had 2 battles on my hands, and you know, the most important thing was my brother's recovery. You know, that was the sole focus. So while all this was going on, you know, I kind of made it my life's plan to get a better understanding of mental health, to understand, you know, the coping mechanisms, what's available out there. And that was, for me, you know, the priority, because what I didn't want was for him to come out of hospital, to make a recovery and then go and do it again. So I spent a long time, and he, during his recovery, refused therapy. Does not agree with him. He won't have it, and even to this day, you know, he's very much against it. But fast forwarding, I mean, obviously he makes a full physical recovery. The support network around him was brilliant. You know, there was a lot of messages of support while he was in hospital. When he came out, he had, you know, a lot of visitors and you know, probably even a bit of a fan club, to be fair. And I don't think at the time he realised how loved he was as an individual. Anybody who knows my brother knows he is one of the most kind-hearted souls. Will do absolutely anything for anyone, and doesn't matter whether he met you once 20 years ago or is your best mate. He will stop you for a conversation every time he sees you, and you know, people worship the floor he walks on. And as I say, at the time, I don't think he realised that people loved him that way. And I think now he's come to terms with the fact, you know, he is loved and appreciated. I think it gave him that boost to, you know, kind of want to carry on in life. And I think, you know, in spite of the, you know, the kind of the whole thing and how, you know, horrific it was for him in terms of, you know, physical and recovery and obviously what was going through his mind at the time, there's a lot of positives that he's taken away from it. You know, he's kind of, he's really come out of his shell, and socially he's in such a better place. He you know, he's constantly going out and seeing friends and meeting new people. You know, and I think, you know, he loves trying new things, setting new challenges, so he's always got a focus in life. And you know, to this day, like, he has bad days, like we all do, but it comes with a simple phone call of, you know, I'm not doing good, you know, and he has the coping mechanisms for that. And that was kind of my life's challenge, if you will, when he was going through everything, to kind of help him have them tools in place. And now he's got them, you know, I think there comes a time where I think for me, you know, I needed to kind of take a leaf out of his book, because, you know, there's me sitting there saying you need to talk, you need to do this, that and the other, but I wasn't doing the same for myself. So pretty much throughout his whole recovery, I spent all that time bottled up, you know, and then that's when I started having conversations with people and opening up about how I felt. And the more I did it, the more liberating the experience was, you know, and there's nothing now that I don't feel fazed about talking about, because it will help me. Hopefully it will help other people. And I'm a true believer in, you know, talking solves problems. I think it's, you know, the best medicine out there. So my brother, so he's autistic, and I would say one thing he really struggles with is problem solving. So when you weigh up something like a mental dilemma, you know, his natural reaction would be to descend into panic. So yeah, I guess you could say at the time it was kind of, you know, maybe he felt like he didn't have that support. One thing I do know is that the action was premeditated. So it was something that was planned before it happened. It wasn't a spur of the moment thing. My brother doesn't drink. He doesn't do drugs, so it wasn't influenced in any way, shape or form, and he was, I guess, in some form of clear mind when, you know, he planned to do what he did. But yeah, I think, like you say, moving forwards, now that he has the coping mechanisms at his disposal, and he knows that he can pick up the phone and talk, you know, he will swear by that, and you know, I think that gets him through life. He has his outlets, you know, he loves his music, so he'll be at a gig every weekend, or and he loves his walks, you know, he still goes on his walks, he'll walk for miles and miles and miles, and you know, he's got 2 dogs that he walks, and when they're out walked, he'll go and pick mine up and take mine for a walk. So yeah, whatever it takes, you know, and one thing about my brother, is an incredibly determined character. So when he does go through that spell, you know, he's got this won't be beat mentality. Mm-hmm. So it's like, right, I'm having a bad day, you know, I need to release myself from this. I need, so yeah, he'll, like I say, he'll go for a walk, he'll go and exercise, he'll work twice as hard, and I think that's a credit to him, from where he was to where he's become. And you know, as a brother looking on, I couldn't be more proud of the person he's sort of become today. So the impact that you know, the turn of events had on me were hard. It was, you know, just one of them where I felt constantly up against it, and I didn't feel like I had an answer for my own problems. I've always been one of them. I feel like I'm very good at helping friends, but never good at helping myself. And at the time, it was a dark and lonely place. If I was to do anything different, I think I would have just taken the approaches that I was learning and implement them into my own mental health. And I think the thing that kind of stopped me from doing that was stigma. You know, we talk about stigma a lot, and I think what really hits home is that, you know, wind back the years, I was afraid to talk about how I felt. You know, I'm encouraging my brother to have these conversations, but I was too afraid to do it myself. And now I just kind of look at that, and it just seems so bizarre, because being so open about talking, as I say, I think it's probably even saved my life, to be fair, you know, with what I've had to deal with over the years. And I just, you know, for anybody out there that is struggling to have them conversations, you know, take it from me, it's the best thing that you will ever do, because once you feel comfortable talking, you'll never look back. It's, you know, I said about pressure earlier, you know, there's only so much pressure you can take before you crack, you know, and talking relieves that pressure. It allows you to focus on your priorities rather than how you feel about a certain situation. You know, unfortunately, these challenges are never going to go away in life. But if you learn to combat them in a way that suits you, it'll allow you to, you know, fulfill your full potential. So, yeah, and I don't think there's a set method for anyone. Like I said, counselling doesn't work for my brother. I've spoken to counsellors before, and you know, it's quite nice, to be fair. It's, you know, and I find it quite helpful. It allows you to get everything off your chest and process. You know, with my brother, he will talk to me, and he'll go on his walks, and that's something that works for him. There's so yeah, everything's different, and I think it's you know, I think with mental health and recovery of mental health, I think it is a journey. It's trial and error, but as long as you're doing positive things, you will end up with positive outcomes. I strongly believe that. So mental health groups within Cadent, I think, are a really powerful thing, and there's nothing but positives come out of it. Since I've been involved with, you know, the advocacy group within Cadent, you know, I've made some really good friends, connected with people, and found a support network. You know, I branched out my support network, should I say. And obviously, having recently joined the Men in Cadent group, I think it's just such a powerful thing, because, you know, the aim of what we're trying to do is, you know, eradicate stigma. I think we normalise the subject of mental health, and I think, you know, going back to the way I used to deal with things, I feel as men collectively, the majority of us, we create these unnecessary barriers. You know, we're taught to be resilient, we're taught to be stoic, and I do believe that part of that is to be true, but I feel like when you're at the point of bottling up, it's an unnecessary barrier. You know, you can soon work your way through that, talk to people, and as I say, I think the stronger man is the one that talks. And you know, with these groups, you know, there'll be, you build friendships, you build a positive environment. You know, you create a support network, and you know, if not for the purpose of talking, you know, you're building great friendships, which that in itself is a positive thing. You know, and you're around, you surround yourself with like-minded people who have gone through journeys of their own, you know, and felt the same things you felt, albeit the story being different. I think that allows, you know, the wider community to kind of see what we're doing, and you know, want to involve themselves in some capacity. So, you know, and especially being a male-dominated workforce, you know, I think, yeah, the Men in Cadent is one of many positive groups that, you know, can really sort of take off and be seen as such a positive thing, as well as, you know, the multiple other groups that are in place here at Cadent. So for anybody that's going through a tough time, you know, the key is to talk. I think talking can be one of the talking for me is the most powerful thing I can do. You know, and I think I spoke about the point earlier, there's pressures, there's challenges in life that you're never going to get rid of. But if you were to put it into, you know, other aspects of your life, if you go to work and you're surrounded by a problem, you would, and you can't deal with it on your own, you speak to a colleague, you speak to a supervisor or a line manager, and they would be able to support you with that work-related issue. You know, for those who have children, if they're struggling with something at school, you will encourage them to talk to a teacher, or you'd speak to a teacher yourself, because you would want them to get the support they need and to be happy with being at school. You know, my biggest question to a lot of people is, why is mental health any different? You know, why is it that we cannot have these conversations? Why is it that we can't talk? And because it's only going to help you. You know, you can't do any damage by having a conversation about how you feel. And the sooner we can break that stigma and normalise the subject, you know, I think the greater the world will be in terms of, you know, people managing their mental health. But yeah, talking. And I think my final piece of advice is, you know, picture yourself in an environment where your best friend or your family member comes to you and says that they're feeling the way that you're feeling right now. How do you respond? And that goes through my head quite a lot when I'm talking to people. And I think that, you know, if you can take yourself out of the equation and see yourself as the person being the support, I think you would take a more understanding approach. So with the people around you, you know, people love you, they care about you, they don't want to see anything bad happen to you. And they would rather sit down and have the conversation with you than, you know, let's say, go through the same thing that I did, and people that have been worse off, you know, have certainly gone through. So